Welcome to Black Belt Beauty Radio, a podcast fueled by a passion to support your journey in developing your most beautiful and optimal performance in life. Each episode is driven with the intention to elevate your mind. When we elevate our mind, we elevate our life. So get ready. It's time to rise. Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back to Black Belt Beauty Radio. It is Solosode time, and I feel like it's the perfect time to put out this episode because it's currently the end of the week. And why I feel a connection to where we are right now in the week to the episode is because usually by the end of the week, I feel that it is universal. We all want to take a deep breath. It doesn't mean anything's bad or wrong. It just means that, we got through another week. And where that connects to the topic is I'm going to walk you guys through my go-to protocol of when I feel overwhelmed, how I get through it, and not just get through it, but keep myself emotionally in charge in those periods of time. I feel like, every single one of us has experienced overwhelm in our lives. Maybe you're going through it right now. And so what's important to, I think, first realize is that it's a natural part of just being alive, right? I think it is especially a part of those lives where, all of you guys who are striving to become better versions of yourself every day, to extract the best from yourself and to, extract the best out of your life, to create a life you love, means that, there's just a lot of moving parts, and a lot of those moving parts are going to, create a lot of challenge. I mean, life is challenging as is, regardless of what life I think you're pursuing. But I think that, the point I'm trying to make is that it could be especially challenging for those who, are path creating and, laying down each and every one of your steps in your path from your own, very consciously, you're doing it with intention, you're doing it with a vision, and, you're not on autopilot basically. So that being said, what I want to share with you, my protocol, these tools, these steps, I've discovered that they are pretty fail-proof for me. At this stage of my life, I have experienced several periods of overwhelm. Fuck yeah, so many. And, these particular steps that I'm going to share just seem to always work, so I've kind of fine-tuned my steps when I feel, a state of overwhelm take over me or try to take over me. And it's just these kind of few simple steps that work every single time. So about to drop in on a recent day that I felt, overwhelmed, and it's a perfect day to kind of guide, you guys through this Solosode, because just like I said, it was recent. And so, it's very robust still in my mind. I woke up in the morning and I immediately felt that I was going to be I felt challenged. I didn't feel bad. I just felt that things were harder, just heavier. And, I think that it was very easy for me to be aware of this because my, how I typically wake up and feel is so not that. I typically wake up, I feel very, kind of eager and fluid and just, I don't know, not heavy, And so, I realized it right away. And I didn't, judge myself or, be like, oh, fuck, here we go. I just was, thought to myself, okay, all right, I see you. I feel you. And proceeded on with my morning. And just to kind of fast forward the story so that I can get to the steps for you guys, a few hours into my morning, while being aware of where I was internally, I was kind of riding this wave that would surge and then, drop down. Like basically I would feel strong and I felt like, okay, no, I'm good. I got this. And then all of a sudden I would feel like, no, things are just, I don't know, things are just harder right now. And I started to feel kind of energy, stacking on me. The day was, moving on, and then so were the tasks that I needed to do, and just everything basically started to kind of tack on top of each other until I got to this point a couple hours later where I'd been writing that wave of emotion, and I was like, all right, it's enough. It was kind of that point where I realized if I don't stop and check myself right now and do what is absolutely necessary for me to pivot myself, then I am going to put myself in a state where I could potentially crack, like where I can have kind of like a breakdown, not like a life-threatening situation. And that's probably important to say too, is that what I was feeling, I think, first of all, this is so real to say that it was one part hormones. And that's a very, very real thing, you guys. It's not some, excuse. And I'm not going to go far into biology right now, even though I love doing that. But I'm saying it because it's real. Women, and, I know men listen to this podcast too, but I think it's important for men to also, just kind of hear this for a second to say that, because, you might have a female partner. And so when you understand, what a woman really has to deal with week by week with these changing, hormones, it's helpful because you get a grip right away on, or like, at least you get some sense of a grip of like, okay, it's not all in my fucking head. You know what I mean? And, I realized that in that particular moment for me, looking at my calendar going, oh, okay, this is where you are. So this, it does make some sense, because here's one example that's important to point out, like where I was in my cycle. The things that were challenging me at the time were not anything extraordinarily different. Were nothing that were like, oh shit, no, it was like, if it was another week in the month, I probably wouldn't. In fact, most likely I would not feel that kind of heaviness and overwhelm that I was starting to feel. Not to put it all on the, hormones, but to say that, yes, it was a huge factor in my, what I was feeling emotionally and mentally in that moment. So, and that could be so much more intense for, women. Basically, everyone's body is different. So, depending on your biology, like it can really fucking play a huge part in, how you are riding your emotional waves, week by week. So I'm going to put a cap on that there, but just to say that, that was definitely a factor in what I was experiencing at that moment. But now going back to the point where I, had been riding this wave in the morning, like feeling strong and like, okay, I got this, to feeling like, fuck, no, I feel kind of overwhelmed and stacked. And so I got to that point where I'm like, Roxanne, if you don't stop right now and check yourself, it's not going to be good for the rest of the day. And so one thing that's really important to realize about that is that I always am aware of the fact that I have a choice. I have a choice in what I, not necessarily all the thoughts that pop into my head, but ultimately what I, allow to really sit within me and, maneuver me through my day. So I realized in that moment that, I had been kind of doing the best that I could, riding this wave, but ultimately it kind of wasn't good enough, and I had to stop everything that I was doing. And then now this is going to roll into my protocol, my steps. All right. So step number 1 is I stopped and I took a series of very deep nasal breaths. Breathing is a true art form, and it is, more and more science is coming out to prove that it's an actual tool to our overall health and well-being. So, a lot of times, like, we're operating when we're in this state of overwhelm, you guys. We are in our sympathetic nervous system, which means that we are in fight or flight mode, right? And taking deep nasal breaths allows us to kind of deactivate that part of our nervous system, or maybe a better way to say it is we switch on our parasympathetic nervous system, which is, rest and digest or recover, right? And so in that moment, I stopped everything. It didn't matter what had to get done. It didn't matter what was, waiting for me. I stopped and I took, a series of deep nasal breaths. Now, another thing that I didn't do in that particular moment in that day, but something else that I do love to do, and I want to acknowledge this as a step because it is absolutely one for me, is I'll go on a walk, I'll step outside and go into nature. Oh man, it's so important, but the reason why, in that moment I wasn't able to do it. And I know that oftentimes that's not going to be the case for everyone. I mean, you could be feeling this at night and, you're not going to walk out and there's, nature waiting for you, but we can always stop and take deep breaths. But I just wanted to throw that out there in case you are able to do that, step outside, take a walk, sit in nature and take your deep breaths there. Nature is so healing, so restorative. It just puts us in a place where it's like, oh yeah, we're so small in this big thing called life. And so our kind of issues and challenges also shrink in that realization too. So, but going back to the breaths, because that's something that we can always rely on no matter where we are. I took those breaths. And, after those series of breaths, I felt space inside. And that's the goal. That's the absolute goal, because you think about it and, when you are feeling overwhelmed, you don't feel like you have space inside. And that's so part of the big discomfort that you're feeling is like everything just feels congested and heavy and stacked, right? And so it's like you don't even know how to do one thing to the next because you're just like, you can't focus, right? And so, I breathed in space and opened my eyes, and then here comes step number 2. Step number 2, you guys, was I literally said to myself out loud, I want you to do one thing at a time and only one thing at a time. And that is huge for several reasons, and I'll explain that in a second. So I literally, in that moment, in that day, it was like this, you guys. Deep breaths, stop, one thing at a time. Put the groceries away. Of course, my brain still had this kind of, residual. I wasn't fully in the clear of the overwhelm, but I was a lot calmer and I did feel more space. But my brain, like as I'm putting groceries away, it's like, yeah, but what about that? What about that? And it's like, I checked myself and I literally, for me, you guys, and it might be the case for you. So I think it's really important to put emphasis on this. I'd say it out loud to myself, Roxanne, one thing at a time. When I would feel it trying to like pull me back in, one thing at a time. And it kept me in that moment of just doing one thing at a time. And so, I put the groceries away, and then it was like wash the dish, and then it was, send the email, and then it was make the phone call. And so, these are kind of smaller tasks that, they all had to get done, truth be told. But what I didn't do is go from breathing to throwing myself back into trying to do the bigger things, maybe the big work thing that's waiting for me or hanging over my head at that moment, or a phone call that, I've been dreading to make, but I know I got to make. I didn't throw myself into a very hard task right after that breathing series. I literally assigned myself to very small tasks and completed them with absolute focus solely on them as I was doing them. And the thing about it, you guys, is that every single time I completed one of these tasks, it was a win. right? And it wasn't necessarily that, oh, I'm celebrating, I put the groceries away and now I'm like applauding myself. No. But the brain still, whether you are acknowledging it or not, recognizes it as a win. So then you're creating momentum, right? Like momentum that is leading you towards control. And again, going back to overwhelm, what are we ultimately feeling when we feel overwhelmed? Yes, we feel stacked on, we feel no space. We don't feel like we have fucking control, right? But the thing is, you start asking yourself to do these step-by-step small tasks that you're so capable of fucking completing and winning, right? That you start to feel a sense of control slowly take over you, right? So fast forward, you guys, I get through a series of these tasks from small to then large, right? Like then, a couple hours later, I am attacking those, important big things that had to get done that day. And man, I'm looking back and I'm like, fuck, I was in a completely pivoted state emotionally, mentally, physically, all of it from where I was at the start of the morning and prior to those deep breaths and when I started to assign myself on those tasks. One other thing that I think is really important to point out about focusing on one small task at a time, super huge, is this. When we are just in the moment and focusing on one task at a time, we are keeping ourselves in the present moment. Now, look, we all like to plan. We all can't even help it, man. It's like we are always looking at, miles and miles in front of us, right? It's so easy to run away from, our state of right here, right now, which is, where life is happening. We all know that. We hear it all the time. Like, all your power is in right now. It's the fucking truth, you guys. But I'm also somebody who's, I love looking forward. I have a whole life that I see in my mind every morning that is not my right here, right now, but it's, it's the kind of, future reality that I'm creating, right? So there's value in, for sure, in like looking forward past this moment and now. But when we bring ourselves into a state of presence and now, there's also a state of peace that comes with it, right? Because we realize, whether we realize it consciously or not, it's like we're breathing, we're healthy, we're sound, we're not feeling so threatened as we can feel and oftentimes do feel when we're so far ahead of our now. And especially when there's challenges and things that, we're having to maneuver through, right? So it's really important to put that out as, a point to say that when you assign yourself these small tasks and then start, you move through them with 100% focus on them, you're not only creating these small wins that are building momentum, that are, helping you gain more control, but you're also keeping yourself very, very present. Very, very present. Listen, in surfing, this is kind of an important piece that I'm going to attach to this before I move on. But I think it illustrates it so perfectly, and I think it'll help to really keep this idea, very vivid in your minds. When you're surfing, when you're paddling for a wave, like you see a wave coming, right? Everything in that moment comes down to how present you are. You have to time your paddle, your position so perfectly to catch that wave. And in order to do that, you have to be 100,000% present in that moment, or else it's not going to happen. Or not only that, but like you can find yourself in a dangerous situation. You can, be so off with your timing and now you're going over the falls or now you're running into somebody, creating danger for somebody else. And so why I love that, because it's just the perfect reminder of like, when you're paddling for that wave and, you whether you're realizing it or not, this is the piece. when you're paddling for the wave, when I'm paddling for a wave, I'm not sitting there paddling going, I'm so present right now. I'm so present right now. Like, I'm not doing that. It's just like this thing that's naturally happening that's allowing me to be in that state of focus and flow. And then, hopefully I'm actually catching that wave, right? And so going back to this piece, this important step again is that, when you are moving through these tasks with 100% focus, step by step, task by tasks, you are keeping yourself in a very present moment. And that creates flow, that creates focus. And again, all of it supports this momentum of gaining control, which is what's going to make us feel really good when we feel overwhelmed because we feel out of control. So now, back to that day and that moment where, fast forward, I've, gotten through some small and then to the big tasks, and I stop and I realize, and this is also very important, I think, to stop and realize, like, holy shit, I pivoted. I got through it. I got through it. Key word is I. And why I want to put emphasis on that is because I relied on myself to get through it. I did not seek some external source to, do the work for me. And that's not to say that you can't get support externally. I saw my best friend that morning, right? Just in passing. And we talked for like a minute, literally. And just to see her face and her energy, oh man, it fortified me. Like I felt stronger. I felt happier. I felt just joy. Basically, I felt love and I felt joy. And that did stick with me in my morning and, really throughout my day. I'm not saying, I say that because I'm not trying to say that a hug from someone you love isn't, shouldn't be acknowledged or it isn't, an effective tool essentially to help, maneuver you through times of overwhelm. Or, anything of that nature. But what I am saying is that when we learn that, we can rely on ourselves to maneuver ourselves, to do the work, right? To get us through these periods of overwhelm, it is so powerful, you guys. And it's this thing where you go, okay, when I stopped and I realized I pivoted, I fucking was in a whole nother universe, emotionally, mentally, physically, from where I was at the start of the day. Well, guess what happens? I get this new stripe on my belt of resilience, of confidence, of, I got this, I'm fucking capable, right? And as far as I'm concerned, everyone who listens to this podcast is wearing a belt. It's a martial art thing. You get a stripe on your belt, right? And it's like you've leveled up. And realizing that is so important because guess what? It's going to happen again, right? Like it's just part of life. But now I have these stripes on my belt that say, hey, remember that time where you were overwhelmed and you maneuvered through it? You went inside yourself. You relied on yourself. You summoned your kind of higher self, your, inner ability to get you through it. It's like you just know that you're capable of doing it again. I think another thing is really, that's important to express here is that you have to know that you can in the first place. Right? When I stopped in the beginning in that period where after I had been riding the wave of emotion all morning and, right before I took the breaths, I knew that I was capable. And that's, it's like that statement of knowing is half the battle. And it really, really is. I think that comes from G.I. Joe, like when I was a kid. I'm pretty sure it does. But anyways, it's so true. It's a statement that really, it comes up. It's been coming up in my life, like throughout my life, 40 years now. It's like knowing is half the battle. Like if you don't believe that you're capable of, maneuvering through periods of overwhelm, well, then you probably aren't, straight up. I'm fucking always going to be real with you guys. But, if you say to yourself, I know, listen, it's going to be hard. I don't know how long this is going to take. But I just know that I can do it and that I'm willing to do what it takes to get me through this period. And, you're already halfway there, right? So, I said this in a recent Solosode where I had just got, I got my car towed, and, it's like, I framed it as like these kind of shit happen moments that we all experience at times. It's like you're doing everything right, things are going great, and then boom, something just lands on you. And in that moment for me, it was like my car got towed $500 later, right? And I one thing that I had mentioned in that episode that I'm going to reinforce, because it's so applicable to this topic as well, is this: when I am challenged, when I feel overwhelmed, when I'm moving through adversity, all of it, right? I want to be able to look back and be like, not only did you get through that shit, but you did it like a fucking emotional boss. You did it with such a sound, state of just emotion. Like, you didn't crack, you didn't break. And I think it's a good time to say that I'm not saying that if you want to cry or have like that kind of expression come out of you when you feel this, that there's anything wrong with that. Fuck no. I am so brutally soft. I love those two words together. And there are times for sure where like I felt overwhelmed and I have to cry. And then, that gives me a sense of relief. But going back to the whole beginning, of this episode, to say that like when I kind of zoom out and look at all these periods where I felt challenged, I felt overwhelmed, and I go, okay, what's really worked for me? I mean, basically it's just that kind of like 1, 2, 3 step. Step number 1 was breathe, make space, get outside if possible, step into nature. Just take a moment to reset your nervous system so you're not in fight or flight mode, right? And it doesn't mean I need to go on, do anything super extreme. It literally, why I want to put so much emphasis on the fact that it literally could just be a couple of minutes of breathing. Because I don't, yes, movement's important. You can go on a long, there are times where for sure I'm like, I just got to go on a run right now. I got to go lift weights. I got to do yoga. But why this is important for me to say that you could really just focus on breath is because you're not always going to be in a situation when you're overwhelmed where you can do those things. Maybe you have a baby crying and something on the stove and somebody waiting for you. Like, you're not going to be able to be like, okay, stop, let me go and do a fucking yoga class. You just can't. But every single human being listening to this podcast right now can stop and breathe. You can breathe for a couple of minutes, however long it takes for you to kind of reset yourself and put yourself in a parasympathetic state, in your nervous system. So you're rest and digest, you're recovered, right? Not fight or flight. And, again, and then step number 2 is start small, assign small tasks, and do not do anything else but that one small task until it is complete, and then start moving towards the bigger essential things that have to get done, right? Build that momentum. And then number 3, you guys, is I really do think that there's so much value in acknowledgement. When you are way past that point, because it'll happen like before you even realize, listen, like, a couple hours, several hours later, whatever it was, I literally like go, whoa, stop. And I look back and I was like, I'm not even there anymore. Like like I said earlier, I'm in a whole fucking other universe right now. And that was so powerful for me to not only feel, but to realize and acknowledge, because again, it puts a stripe on my belt. I'm recognizing the kind of win, the pivot. And I'm so empowered by it, because I also know that this isn't the last time. That was not the last time. But I have another stripe that's going to support me when that next period comes, to say, you got through that shit and you did it like a badass. And that's so important to me. I want to fucking keep it together in the most beautiful, sexy, powerful way, empowered way that I possibly can, throughout my life, I think when we're younger, it's like harder to kind of have that grip. But as we start to move through our life and experience things, like I really live by the idea that we can get better at this. And we can become more badass in these, moments to where we start to, just become more emotionally resilient. Not to be confused as being a fucking robot and having no emotion. No, but you just are more just capable of just maneuvering through these times in a very strong, secure, I got this kind of fucking way, basically. All right. So the goal was to support you, to offer you some of my go-to, or offer you, not some of, but my actual go-to steps that just don't fail me at this point. When I feel times of overwhelm, they just get me through these periods in a state where I can sit here and honestly tell you with all my heart, like, I feel proud of how I'm able to do it. I'm proud, and I feel like I can just continuously get better and better at it. I believe in myself, and I know that I'm capable to continuously maneuver through challenges, adversities, times of overwhelm in particular, in a state of like just being an emotional badass. And here's my last kind of bit on it. Why that's so important to me is because, everything that I'm creating in my life is going to mean that there are fucking going to be more challenges. There's a lot more. There's going to be periods that are going to feel stacked and overwhelming at times. And that's just naturally going to come with the things that I am creating for my life. Like when we think about the things that we want to experience for our life, that we want to create, all the beauty in it, all the joy, all the abundance, all the wealth, all that, we don't often, and I understand why, we don't often kind of think also about the challenges that are naturally going to be a part of those scenarios, those goals, those visions, those things actually accomplished and actualized, right? But, it's like balance, man. If you're going to build this huge, major successful business, well, guess what? There's going to be a lot of challenges that are going to, be coming with that business too. If you're, having a baby, like you're going to have the joy and the love and all that yumminess of having a baby, but there's also going to be the challenges that come with it. And so when we realize when we stop and we go, oh fuck, I was able to maneuver through this period of overwhelm and challenge in such a beautiful, like badass way, then, you just know that everything that you're, expanding yourself towards in your life, like all the challenges that come with the great parts of it, you got it. I've got nothing more to say. Done. Oh man, I hope it helps you. I hope that, if you are in a state of overwhelm right now, like this just gave you a boost of, I fucking got this, because I really believe that you do. And if there is overwhelm that, is on the horizon for you, I hope that these words just, flash in your mind, when that period comes and, you can incorporate some of these steps, or maybe they inspire some of your own. But, just overall, the message here is to empower you and remind you that you have the ability to maneuver through these periods, relying and the power within you to do it. And when you do, fucking celebrate it and just realize that you're a badass. All right, you guys, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for spending your time here with me. As always, it means everything to me, and I'm always looking forward to being right here with you again. Thank you so much, you guys. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode, you guys. If you loved it, please share it on your social. Throw it up on your Instagram stories and tag me. I'm at Black Belt Beauty. I am also at Roxy Look, RoxyLook. I love connecting with you guys. This is a conversation that I want to just continue growing with you guys. So if you feel inspired, to hit me up, do so in that space. I always enjoy hearing from you. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by rating it and reviewing it via iTunes. It's such supportive help, you guys. It really helps the visibility of this podcast. So I appreciate and thank you in advance for doing that. And last but not least, if you are interested in starting your own podcast, or perhaps you already have one and you need help with, editing your audio and the production of it, I cannot recommend my producers enough. Resonate Recordings, you guys, they are the bomb. I rely on them. They are an absolute supportive tool to me and my podcast. So check them out and let them know that Black Belt Beauty sent you. And on that note, you guys, I'm signing off with all my love and always looking forward to catching you on the next.